Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Goblins and Growlers Podcast. I'm Josh Maltby at Black Cloak DM on the social medias.
I'm Brandon Dingus at Way of Brandalore on various social media, though I may change that soon. I haven't decided yet. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm well. I'm rested. It was a long week with some exciting things in it, but I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Recovering a little bit from being ill, but it's good. I think this is also the first episode we've recorded since I finished grad school, so I'm feeling much more relaxed now, and I'm finding myself wandering around the house on weekday evenings, not quite knowing what to do, because for the first time in 2 years, I don't have like way too much to do, so it's good.
I got to get started on my studies. Wait, I don't have studies.
No, instead I can go upstairs and play Project Zomboid for 3 hours and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But today we've got a really fun episode that was a long time coming. When we were at Too Many Games in Philadelphia, we met for the second time, Nomnivore Games, and finally got to have like a really solid discussion, because last year at TMG, they didn't have really their full contingent there. They just sent one of their folks. But then this year they sent like everybody, including Derek, their president. And we just got to chatting, and we're like, oh, you should come on the podcast and talk about, Nomnivore's ethos and everything. He's like, well, actually, we have a secret new game that's coming up that we're going to have a Kickstarter for. And that Kickstarter launched at the beginning of August. And that's when we originally wanted to talk to them. But we've been going back and forth for like 6 weeks on email trying to nail down a time, because like they have a full convention schedule that they have to go to. Like various people over the course of all this got COVID. I was trying to wrap up school and get that taken care of. But finally, we're recording this on the Saturday before this comes out. And finally, this past Thursday, we were able to connect with three of them. Kate, their VP, Kirby, who's one of their game designers, and Britt, who is one of their writers. And we got to have a nice long conversation chatting about not only their new Kickstarter, Nomventure, which is an RPG specifically designed for children, but we got to talk about a lot of other stuff, like sort of the philosophy of the company, because Derek has a background in psychotherapy, so everything they do has sort of a mental health angle on it. And in keeping with what Josh and I have been trying to do for Patreon, is we recorded 3 episodes of GGP Deep Dives with them after the main episode. And we got into talking specifically about Nomnivore and mental health, about the way they teach games and how they've systematized that for a lot of their convention appearances, and also sort of their perspectives on the crossroads of storytelling and GMing. So those will be coming out on the Patreon over the next few weeks, but just want to let you know those are there. We're making that a regular thing. They're going to be out, in audio and video on the Patreon as well. So it's really cool. It was a great conversation. I've sort of taken over here, Josh, but you're bopping around over there. I want to make sure I'm not stepping on you.
No. I was just gonna say, it is kind of funny that like we said, oh, let's start this conversation right when the Kickstarter is launching, so that it'll be fresh and it'll be on everyone's minds, and you guys will get tons of support. And then being 5 busy adults with important things to do,
yeah,
it's like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, the good news is the Kickstarter runs through September 3rd. So even as y'all are listening to this, you've still got plenty of time.
Yeah, I think Kate did the math and said it was like 10 more days as of the episode release.
Yeah, something like that. And obviously we're going to have links down in the description on this, but the Kickstarter is cool because it has a link to a free basic rules primer on the game, and also a free basic adventure to just help you get used to it. It's statless. Very interesting. It's it's like I said, it was designed for kids, and it's there to help kids recognize emotions, process them, deal with them, things like that. It's very interesting. It was a really great hour-long conversation for the main Fiend episode, and then we get into a lot more detail on the Patreon stuff. It was really cool.
Yeah, if you want the inside baseball stuff, that's when you need to go to patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers and be signed up at the $5 or higher level.
Yeah.
If you're really interested in who they are as a company, don't worry, we're going to cover that.
Yeah. And then other than that, I just want to pitch our newsletter really quick. The monthly gaming newsletter that I put out usually comes out about the end of the month. It's free. I have no desire to make it more than monthly at this point, so I'm not going to spam you, but it's just news from the gaming industry. It's sort of highlights from what we've talked about on the podcast. It's little quick bullet points of where you can find us going forward. You can get the sign up link for that at our link tree, linktr.ee/goblins and growlers. I really enjoy putting it together, and I really want audience feedback from what they want to see in it and everything. But I think we're good to go ahead and throw to ourselves from a couple days ago, if that works for you, Josh.
Heck yeah. Take it away, us. All right, Brandon. I'm really excited. We have not one, not two, but three fabulous guests today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled as well because we're going to push the absolute limits of what we can fit on screen. It's going to look like a late 90s MSNBC broadcast with how many different boxes and windows we've got up on the screen at one time. But yeah, we've got finally, after admittedly several weeks of all of us trading emails, we've got Nomnivore Games, the makers of Dungeons and Dinos, Emberwind, and the new game that we brought them here to talk about that they've got a Kickstarter going on for right now. But before I get too far off track, I'm just going to go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves. And Kate, I think we'll start with you.
Ooh, I hate being first, but sure.
I'm sorry.
Well, credit is due where credit is due, and Britt and Kirby have done all the fabulous hard work on Nomventure, so they are definitely the most important. But I'm Kate. I'm the VP at Nomnivore Games, and my pronouns are she, her.
All right. Britt?
Hi, I am Britt. I am a narrative writer for Nomnivore Games, and I guess now in charge of logistics, maybe? I don't know. She, her pronouns. And Kirby's probably the most important for you guys today. So,
okay.
Kirby.
All right. So that's why we saved him for last.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kirby. He, him, with Nomnivore Games. I'm a game designer for future Emberwind stuff and for Nomventure, and I do some of the writing as well.
Okay, I'm
Awesome.
really thrilled. I'm really thrilled and appreciative that y'all have made time to chat with us tonight. I'll try and tee this up a little bit, but I first became aware of you guys at Too Many Games in Philadelphia, not this year, but last year, when just by the roll of the dice, we were boothed next to you guys. So had a chance to chat and learn a little bit about Dungeons and Dinos, pick up a copy of it. And I just really sort of loved philosophically the approach that you all had to game design, just in terms of things like accessibility. And because like I look at game design at or at least tabletop games existing on a spectrum with like really like GM-less collaborative stuff at one end and like war games from the 70s at the other end. And I tend to live at the collaborative end of the spectrum. So anything that can sort of deconstruct the mechanics of a game to like get us to the point where we're really just sort of telling stories with aids to help us tell the stories, I really enjoy that. But then this year, when we were at TMG, Derek was actually there this year.
I was too. I don't know how we missed each other, but
it was nuts. That weekend was nuts. We had so much stuff going on. But what's Derek's title there? Is he like the president of Nomnivore?
President, yes.
Okay. So we had a chance to meet with him, do a panel with him and everything. And he and I just got to talking a little bit. And he was like, well, I'll tell you, if you like that stuff, let me tell you about this other thing that we're probably going to be talking about in a few weeks. And he started talking to me about Nomventure a little bit. And he's like, oh, it's a game for kids. You can use it for talk about using it therapeutically and all of that stuff really just appealed to me, especially like finding because like Goblins and Growlers, our big thing has been inclusivity and finding ways to bring more people into the hobby and just like take down barriers to entry for it. So that's one of the things that really resonates with me about you all and the way you approach things. So I'll let it go there because I'm talking way too much when we've got company. And I'd really love for you all to just talk a little bit about Nomventure, introduce the audience to it, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, Nomventure was really born out of the concept that Nomnivore Games adhere to, which is making sure that gaming is accessible for everyone and anyone. We really look and strive to find I don't know if interesting is the right word for it, ways to make sure that games are accessible. So like Dungeons and Dinos and Snack Attack are all specifically designed to be inclusive. Snack Attack has, the Braille pinholes across the bottom, and we're always looking for perhaps not the most evident and obvious ways to make sure that everyone can play games. And one of the big barriers we came up against when looking at making a kid's TTRPG was how complex they are. You can't throw down a copy of, that really popular one that has a lot of rules and a lot of pages on the table and expect kids to play it. No way, no how. Thus, Kirby came up with the idea of Nomventure, and we've been helping bring it to life. So on that note, I will let Kirby tell you guys about it.
So Nomventure was really born out of the idea that, we wanted to run more games for children at conventions. We're at a lot of conventions. And the original idea was to, maybe we'll reskin Emberwind and just kind of dial that back. But for me, that's probably like one of my least favorite things to go about even just teaching a game to anyone, much less a child, right? Because there's a lot of like on the fly, usually, what does this child need to learn, or what mechanics actually important here, and all that stuff. So although Nomventure has a lot of Emberwind DNA, it's maybe not immediately prevalent, right? So Emberwind's just really combat focused game, but has a lot of role playing mods, for example. And actually, the core mechanic behind the Nomventure is derived from one of the role playing mods, which is played with a deck of cards. It's used for skill checks out of combat, and when you start role playing with it, trying to fast talk your way past the guard, whatever have you, you start adding and taking away from the deck. So I took that and kind of ran with it as the primary. The main mechanic of the game is very tactile. You get to build up or shrink a deck depending on what the situation is. So you can visually see like how good you are at a thing, or you can. One of our mods includes tackling problems like with a capital P, right? And so the problem deck is like its own like physical deck that you can just kind of take cards away and watch your problems shrink before you. And so for us, it wasn't just reskinning Emberwind and making it usable for kids. It was starting from the ground up with a lot of influence from Emberwind and other tabletop role-playing games. We start off super simple. You can actually check out the primer on the Kickstarter. That's just a one-pager front and back, the most simple version of the rules possible. And then you can add... it's a modular game, so you can start adding what we call mods to the game, and you can start layering that. You can do that within the same session. You can introduce 2 or 3 mods if your table's really feeling it, or maybe you just stick with the basic rules, and it's meant to be a game that grows with you. So whenever your table's ready for those more advanced rules or extra texture, as it were, you can pick them up or drop them in the middle of the session if it's not working out for you, right? Some of these mods are also designed to just really highlight what's important for that session, right? So, for example, we have the emotions mod, which can help children and other players basically process or identify emotions as you're playing along, both within themselves and with one another. And suddenly we're interrogating, is this emotion really helping with what I'm doing right now, or is it not? Because it's a pretty free-form list. You literally just write it in. We don't have any preconceived, this emotion's automatically bad. This emotion's automatically good. You can take the same emotion and it could be good or bad for different situations or with different people. Yeah.
So it's like the emotions mod is really sort of an emotional awareness tool for children.
Absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about mods because I was reading through the materials that you guys had provided. I thought it was like sort of interesting the terminology you were using for it. Like it's modular, but you call something mod, and that means a lot of different things in a lot of different gaming communities, right? But the first thing before I get to that is like your decision mechanic in this game is card based, right? It's not dice based.
Correct. It's card or token based. You can alternatively play with tokens and pull out a bag like Scrabble, right?
Right. Right. Can you just sort of walk through how that mechanic functions and like why you went that way?
Right. Yeah. So anytime you need to do anything in non-venture and we need to figure out, well, did you do it, or answer the question of, well, is it interesting whether or not you pass or fail? You are building a deck of cards, and for our players, is always key to you're always going to have eight cards in the deck. Those cards are both yay and nay cards. So we have red and blue cards to represent pass or fail, and if you're familiar with Emberwind, it's kind of like our deck of fates. From there, you describe what you're doing, and if it aligns with any of the traits that are on your sheet, well, we add that number of yay cards to the deck. Then we fill out the rest of the deck with nay cards, the failure cards, until you have 8. And then afterwards, depending on whether or not you're playing with other mods or getting help from another player, etc., we might add or take away cards. Once you've built that, you will pull a number of cards depending on how easy or hard it is. Your adventure guide will tell you how many cards to pull. So something that's really hard would be 2. Something that's really easy would be 4 cards. And you're trying to get at least 2 yays in order to score a win.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess you went with that mechanic just because it dovetails really nicely with like your other products and things.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think having the cards gives you far more control. Dice, there's always a high level of chance. With the cards, we can directly control how much success or failure. If you're having good feelings, if someone's helping you, you can. I don't want to say stack the deck in your favor, but that is kind of what's happening in that instance. Your chance of success increases depending upon how well we're doing. With dice, you can still just be having a really bad time, and that's not necessarily the most fun for kids. Ultimately, you want to have fun and do good, not hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, that's an issue I run into a lot and have a lot of conversations just sort of in sort of the D&D sphere about, because I very much prefer running like narrative games rather than like really crunchy games. And one of the things that sort of has me sort of falling toward apostasy in some groups is like the idea that I don't necessarily care what the dice say if a combat is going in such a way that like person X has like fumbled like 3 times in a row and they've just been beaten down and they're down to about 3 hit points and maybe it's like their first or second session. Like I want to keep them engaged in the game, and sometimes you can't do that if you're just strictly going by what the dice are saying. And like, because I've played with GMs in the past who have been like, no, sorry, that's what the numbers say. I'm like, well, that's great, but I'm also having a miserable time and I don't want to play this game.
It is, and it might be one of those where, and I don't want to say it's a failure of, the GM or the DM, but rolling a 1 or even rolling low is not necessarily indicative of failure. It's just a result of what's happening. And someone should be able to pivot that story for you and still progress your story while not going, well,
exactly.
Fail forward. 100% fail forward.
I think one of the biggest flaws with Dungeons and Dragons has always been sort of its lack of embracing the idea of a fail forward mechanic. If like there are like, as much as and Josh will love this because I'm going to talk about it again for like the 2nd episode in a row, but as much as I hate on the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, and it's like 10 blue billion different dice, like I love how it's nearly impossible to fail anything in that game because you just have so many options of screwing up with like winning with a price or failing forward or something like that. It's just it's so important. And obviously with non-venture, we're talking about children and notoriously short attention spans and trying to keep them engaged in the game, right? But also grown-ass adults. have notoriously short attention spans, especially nowadays when if you're running a table, you have to fight for people's attention over like with their phones and stuff like that, right? So you have to do everything you can to try to keep them roped in to the game, and being a little bit more fluid with how you're handling the mechanics of it, I think is a great way to do that. Like I never let something happen that just logically doesn't make any sense. But if I can fudge some decisions, I'm happy to do that if it keeps somebody in. Because you were saying like, oh, I don't want to say that it necessarily represents a failure of the GM. I think it represents a failure of imagination and a failure of awareness of the other people at your table who gave up like their Thursday night to come over to your house and hang out and play a game. Like they deserve to have a good time. And how can I help facilitate that?
That's like we just did an actual play of Nomventure with some of our friends over at Nom Cafe and Vivid Vision and a couple other
Story
people.
Engine.
Yes, Story Engine. I was trying to remember. My brain completely spaced on their name. And
I got you, boo.
Peter's gonna kill me. But one of their players, Maruki, actually said that this was the second time she had really tried any kind of RPG, and she was like, "This was very user friendly. I was not scared to sit at your table, and like Maruki's a grown up, like you know, and we're playing as kids." And Britt actually played that game as well, and Kirby was the GM for that game, and it was very fun to watch. You know, 6 adults essentially become noms and progressively move the story forward without any hesitation and come away looking very confident with what they were doing. So it was very fulfilling to watch that on the back end while they were playing.
How is it as an adult playing this game designed for children? Like, do you find it freeing to be able to just chuck everything else out of your head and just lean into it?
Yes. So, as a mom who, constantly has to logic the tales that my son and I tell, he's 4, and his favorite thing to do is get his playmat out and play Castle, where he has 4 different types of army men. So he has the King Arthur's court, and then he has World War II men, World War I men, and then dinosaurs. And so I'm telling a story as to how all of these have met on the battlefield, being able to just throw everything out and be in that set of imagination around adults who then can make sense of all of the things that are going in my head is absolutely fantastic.
I love that. Games are games, and I think sometimes in our hobby, people take games a little bit too seriously, because I think a lot of the times we identify it a little bit too closely with our personality. Like, I'm a gamer. Like, I play tabletop games, right? And it becomes sort of this psychological thing that people have to defend sometimes. And I think that kind of, I don't know, like capital S serious or gatekeepy behavior comes out of something like that. And I really appreciate just the idea of something where it's just like, yeah, man, we're just gonna be all kids having fun on this thing, not serious at all. Do you think from the emotional awareness or therapeutic aspects of it or anything like that, there's stuff adults can take from it?
Oh, for sure. I think anything that gets somebody thinking about the emotions that they would feel in a situation and bringing that awareness to them, even at a gaming table where they're not necessarily feeling that, but they're seeing other people go through different problems and how they're handling it. And I feel like anybody who's paying attention can pull something from that for their own experiences.
Just go ahead, Josh.
I've also noticed that there's a lot of, and I imagine this is especially helpful for the kids, but there's a lot of adults out there that don't have great language for some of the things they're experiencing. And when they find that language, it can be very freeing to be like, oh, there's a word for that thing that I experience. This is not a unique to me thing. This is something that other people also feel and experience and struggle with or enjoy, whichever side of the coin it may be on. And that moment of like, it's not just me it's so freeing for everybody, not just kids, but I imagine especially kids who are maybe just learning about the big emotions they may be experiencing.
So one of the cool things I'm super excited once we get a test copy and send you will be we're doing these emotion cards that will, like as you were saying, being able to name something is really cool. But they will be translucent PVC. So you'll be able to take two colors representing two different emotions and lay them over each other and see how they transform and better
Ooh.
understand kind of how you got from, I'm feeling this way and now I'm feeling this way, and how do we process that and what do we do about that? So it's not only just being able to put a name on something, but quite literally hold it in your hands and walk through that process as part of the therapeutic element, which I think I'm really excited about that part. That might be super lame of me, but I'll be excited to hear what you think too.
No, I'm excited about that as well. A common experience for me is anytime I get like a big angry feeling for whatever reason. Usually it's because I haven't slept enough and I'm stressed out. And I'm just like, God, I'm so grumpy right now. Like on the tail end of that, I might still be a little grumpy, but I start getting like really sad about how grumpy I've been all day. And like, being able to go, I'm still kind of grumpy, but I'm also sad about being grumpy, and like layer them over each other. That sounds awesome.
And right, and what new feeling are we experiencing there, and what impact is that having on us? As people at the table, and both, overall, like how we're interacting with in real life too. So hopefully, what you're
100%.
taking away from the table can also eventually be applied to how you move in the world.
I'm imagining like future expansions of your emotion cards where eventually you get to one and it's like, I'm feeling very Jejune. So I'm gonna play that one.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing ennui today.
Yeah.
Ennui is my new. So we'll definitely have a consult call about the necessary future emotion cards. I can see expansion round 2 happening already. Here's my new feelings.
See if you can get a native French speaker in on that one. They seem to own a lot of those words.
Yeah.
The Germans too.
Yeah, the Germans have all those words for things that we don't.
Yes.
Might be tricky to layer some of the German like Schadenfreude is going to be tough to fit.
We're gonna need half cards. The ones you just
Yeah.
I love the idea of a 6-year-old feeling joy at the failure of another and playing Schadenfreude cards.
Oh my god!
I don't think that. I don't think that's healthy.
But it teaches them petty, right? Because then you could layer petty.
I'm feeling disappointment and joy, but your disappointment.
I wonder if Jen could make the emotion card for petty look like Tom as a Nomnivore.
I think so. All right, done. When I have to tell Derek about this later, you all are responsible. When he watches it, he goes, "What did you agree to?" Look.
Anytime you and I have ideas together, he's just like, "What did you do?" If you didn't see him at Gen Con, Josh, he had a nice shirt on. That said not.
Oh.
So as we have embraced staff shirts officially.
Okay.
And they
Makes
all
sense.
have all of our cards that we have in Dungeons and Dinos have kind of a signature text across the top. And I've taken that text that are on our staff cards and applied them to everyone's staff shirts except for Derek's, which says the dog developer. Britt had the rather ingenious idea. So now his shirt says Con Daddy across the back. And he's very disappointed in all of us.
I feel for him, and let me tell you why. Because I, in our office, by our ownership, by several people, have been named Business Daddy.
Oh, I love that. Oh, we're gonna get you one. We're gonna put Business Daddy on it.
Yeah. I would wear it.
Yes. You heard it here first. Nomnivore Game shirt for Brandon, Business Daddy. Done.
Yeah.
If you've never heard Brandon's "I'm disappointed in choices you've made" voice, like, man, that sells you on the idea of Brandon as Business Daddy so fast.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
I'll deviate and then I'll bring us back on track. But the reason Josh is bringing this up is because probably about 5 years ago, we were recording an episode of our actual play podcast. And my character in the podcast is like an over the hill professional wrestler who's like in sort of the twilight stages of his career and everything. And he like the party was goofing around and really making him read me irritated. And so through the character, I took it out of them and I just laid out like the most disappointed dad speech possible. And we were recording in the studio that we had at the time. And once it was done, like the whole room was silent. And then I think somebody was just like, damn. And it just killed all the energy in the room. And after for like weeks afterward, everybody was just like, I just didn't know how to respond to that. I just like, I felt personally attacked, even though it was in character.
It's like It's like my own father was speaking through you with all this disappointment. It's so bad.
No.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
yeah. No, it's
Cue the
fine.
Linkin Park songs.
Hopefully Derek's con daddy is less in that vein of fatherliness.
Oh no, it's very disappointed.
Oh no.
I suspect it's on Brandon levels, honestly. When he makes the like really face, I'm like, hi.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I always imagine myself as just that manager, like capital T, capital M. I'm like, okay, guys, come on, hustle up. We got to pull it together, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody's like, oh, I hate this guy. But anyway, I think we've gotten a little bit off track, so I'm gonna bring it back just a little bit. I wanted to talk some too about the character sheets for this game because the thing that stood out to me about them, just as I was scanning through before I even read anything, is that they're statless. And what I like about that is like one of the games that we work with a Portuguese game designer, and we license a bunch of his stuff and produce it for the US and distribute it at cons and stuff like that. And one of our favorite things he created was a game engine that is essentially statless for character creation. You just choose from like a tables of traits or roll on them and stuff like that. So that was the first parallel that I drew when I was looking at this. And because when I'm trying to explain that to somebody at the booth who are like, oh, what's this? And I'm like, oh, well, it's a very simple system. And it's statless and everything. And people are like, oh, well, really? Tell me about these character sheets. And like, oh, no, like all the role play comes from the traits that you draw from the character. And then you have to interpret those. And everybody's always fascinated by that. So that's why I was really interested in this, because I guess there's a part of me that thinks it would be easy for kids to understand, like, okay, like I have a strength metric that is like a 2 or an intelligence metrics that's a 4. So I'd just like to hear sort of the process that got you to the statless character sheets on that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I picked up a copy of this rule book at Too Many Games and the character sheets actually to give to Kirby because when you explained it, I was like, oh, okay. I'm into this. This speaks to me. So that highly ironic that we've come full circle from the little book I picked up there and was like, Kirby, you need to know about this. But I will let Kirby and Brett speak to that further. I just thought that was quite good when you mentioned the Portuguese game center. I was like, yes, we know about him now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, Nomventure has a lot of Emberwind DNA, and one of the options in Emberwind is to just build your character by picking a bunch of words. So I went that route when we were first developing it, and we don't have a character sheet to throw up right now, but it's really simple. It's just you have a column where you have 4 spaces for 4 different traits that are important to you. We went that route because if you're trying to cater to like child appropriate content, like you're gonna have like the traditional traits that aren't gonna necessarily be relevant all the time, right? Oh, there it is. Yeah. So like you brought up strength, and it's like, well, in a lot of these children's story, how important is strength, right? So we wanted a way to decide story by story, or even just child by child, what was going to be important. And I know many kids in my life love to just, like, when we're playing pretend, love to just tell me all about their character and whatever story we're doing, right? It's like, oh, I guess you have super speed now. Yeah, that works for you. So yeah. So this trait system really embraces how many children already play. Which is they're going to tell you what's awesome about whatever it is about them right now, right? Whether they're pretending to be a superhero from a film or pretending to be an Olympian or whatever have you, they're going to tell you along the way. And actually, one of the optional things they can do is instead of having the character sheet filled out, you can just learn as you go and fill it out, right? So that's part of it. And these traits, I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about how the core mechanic works. Well, these traits are basically just crayons for the kids to color a situation with. Whether you're the adventure guide or the kid, when we have a problem to tackle, like getting a cat down from a tree, you tell me how being really tall or how being book smart is helping it, right? And that colors the situation. That tells me, like, well, how hard should this check be? And what sort of consequences or what does success look like once we get into it, right? So that's really what it breaks down to, is just kind of embracing the way children already play, because, I mean, let's face it, like, children don't need this game to play pretend and do what they're already doing. So
you've gone the descriptive route rather than the proscriptive route of just like, we're just going to meet people where they are on it. I like that. There are a lot of times when I'm like working and I'm trying to help somebody problem solve, and they're like, oh, but no, we got to solve it this way. We got to solve it this way. I'm like, well, here's where we are now. And here's like the actual reality that we're dealing with. I feel like we should probably start here and then try to find our solution from that point, rather than try to back into it with a process that's not necessarily going to fit. So I think that's great. That makes a ton of sense to me. And I guess it just goes back to engagement too, because like, what's the best way to get a kid engaged? It's to get them to talk about something that they're really passionate about, something they're excited about. Maybe it's the last movie they saw or the last book they read or had read to them or something like that, and that'll just fill this out for them, essentially.
That leans into something that I experience a lot with kids at RPG tables to begin with, which is they're not that interested in whatever the book says they can do. They're like, oh, I want it. We have a bucket. I want to put a bucket on the orc's head. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. 100% you have a bucket now. Please roll a die for bucket on head. And they're like, I got like a 14. I'm like, that's amazing. That bucket is totally on that orc's head now. And I've had players that are so book focused that they're like, well, that's not a mechanic. And I'm like, no, the orc's affected by blindness because of his head bucket. Like, what are you worried about? This is great. And it's just kids already want to like do whatever they want to do. So having the system adapt to that and not only encourage it, but be part of it is awesome. What a great choice.
Yeah. And just like, like sort of like I had said earlier, like that player who's like, well, there's no mechanic for that. Like that's a struggle. Like I remember Leonard Nimoy one time said that like somebody asked him about all these people who are like super into Star Trek canon and how they're just really anal about it and what his opinions were about them. And he was like, well, they're acting that way because it's something in their life that they really think they can control. So that's why they're just hanging their hat on it all the time. But they need to really just, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, but he's like, but they really just kind of need to loosen up, man. Because his whole point was talking about like, I think it was the J.J. Abrams movies and how they were set in a different canon and stuff like that. And he was trying to sort of like speak to the fans about like, hey, man, it's fine. It's just stories. It's just fun. But I think that's the same mindset of the person who's like, well, that's not rules as written. Like, I don't know the mechanic for how to do that. It's like, well, there isn't one, but we also all try. I thought at least that we agreed to come here to have fun. And I think that's what we need to focus on today, if I'm being honest.
As
Absolutely.
a player and as a DM, I am a rules lawyer's nightmare. I let one of my players prestidigiclean a black ooze once.
Yeah.
So, like, that's definitely off book for this spell. But I was just like, you know what? It can clean 5 feet of space at a time, right? So
Mhm.
let's just go with it.
Yeah. No, my favorite phrase as a GM is like, I'm willing to see where this goes. or like, I'm interested to see how this plays out. Like, make your arguments, counselor, and we will make a ruling on how this ends up. And usually it's in a much better place than I could have gotten this on my own. So I'm happy to just give
describe to me how that looks, and we'll go from there.
yeah, exactly. And it almost always puts you in a better spot than anything you'd planned. And that sort of brings me accidentally to another point I wanted to ask about, and it's like playing with kids is difficult. I think to a certain degree we can all say yes, that's true. Like trying to run kids through an on the rails adventure is just a wild cat herding kind of thing. And I wonder how that factors into your writing. Like I read through, admittedly very quickly, the sample adventure that you had with the materials, and I just wonder how much that was in the back of your head. Like, okay, how much flexibility do we have to keep here? Do we have to have branching paths and stuff? Like, how do we corral these kids? And I understand like you've got the adventure guide there to help try to keep things on track a little bit. But how does the reality of children together playing meet how the story was written as intended, and how involved the adventure guide really needs to be?
So these example adventure is a very good time. You play as Nomnivore trying to help your queen feel less I don't think homesick's the right word. She's missing her family members who have gone away on vacation or whatever, is missing their cooking, right? So there's a magical berry you can go get that can taste like anything you want. So that was written alongside the primer, which the primer, the one pager didn't always exist, right? We initially had this kind of denser big book that was trying to cover all those bases before we decided to kind of peel back. So with that in mind, like that primer and the adventure are both for new players and new adventure guides. If you're a parent who's picking this up, or whomever, and we're running an adventure for the very first time, you've never been in this hobby, you can pick up these two example things for free and just learn how to run it. So it was just as important that we cover the bases of like how flexible this can be by giving a bunch of different options for the adventure guide in a very concise way. And optionally in a way that they can just also randomize, and really just kind of communicate that you're really just there to build a situation and just try to react as best you can, knowing what you can possibly know about the situation at hand, knowing what's allegedly coming up next, but it could go completely off the rails. And I think, and at least one of my drafts, I talk about that in the example adventure, as like, well, you can spend some time not going this direction, and maybe this other thing happens, right? So,
Writing scripted stuff is the hardest thing to do for children ever. Like the first iteration that you and I worked on, where we wanted to demo this at PAX Unplugged last year, and he's like, Derek's thing was, I want you to write a scripted adventure, and I was like, for children? Like, I can't even write, like, writing a scripted adventure for adults. Listen, my first time DMing, it took 53 4-hour sessions to get my players through Dragon Heist. Which is only supposed to be like 9 to 12 sessions, right? Yeah, 53, because, they went completely off the rails, and I'm super good at herding cats. So, I think it's easier to write broadly now than what it was at the beginning of this. Would you say, Kirby?
Yeah, I would say so. The initial approach that we took was it was too wordy. I think we knew that going in right off the bat. We got a lot of good feedback from some of our partners. Shout out to Aloha Adventurers Guild for the feedback they gave. which is part of the reason why we kind of took it back to square one with the primer in the adventure, and then going back in the bigger book and rewriting that to be more concise. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, you have to be willing to just accept that, you know, what you came to the table with might not be what you wind up using.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big scary thing for, I mean, I think anyone of any age, whether you're the precocious 7-year-old who decided to be the adventure guide, or a like 30-something-year-old parent running this for your kid, right? I think what might help in that regard, if you are running for children, it's best to talk to children about these sort of things before you get into the middle of it. Trying to corral children to like sit down and play this game that they've never like played before it would be difficult, right? Because they're already their minds are often already like ahead of where you're at or just elsewhere in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you all talk about this just in terms of children, and I know Josh will back me up on this, but well, like one of the things we do for Goblins and Growlers is we write all of our own original content for the public games that we run, and there was a period in time where we were running 6 public games a month, right? So we're just cranking out like all this material, and we had to learn very quickly how modular we needed to make it. Like we had to be able to have like things on the side for the GM to be able to slot in to either draw stuff out, or like I can pick this combat up and move it out, so they could, you know, condense things if they needed to, because we would, like, the way we do it is we have volunteer GMs, and usually day before, maybe day of, we'll get them the adventure for that's going to be run at that event, right? So they don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to study it, and so they have to be nimble, and they have to know what can cut, what can drop in, and like nowadays, like a lot of them are much more experienced and they can just roll with it, and it's actually not that big of a deal. But anytime we have like new GMs come aboard, or back in the day 5 or 6 years ago, it was really deer in the headlights for a lot of people, because they're just like, I wasn't expecting them to do that, and I've only run like 4 games before in my life. But now you talk to them now and they're just like grizzled young veterans on these kind of things, and it's actually, it's pretty hilarious actually, just to see how much they're just like, yeah man, nothing phases me, as they take the cigarette out of their mouth.
Yeah, drinking their coffee black.
Yeah, I've seen things. This doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that's something y'all have found as well, is that when you're creating for people who maybe don't have a lot of experience running, and maybe don't have a lot of experience improvising things on the fly, you're tempted to be like, well, let me build a complete and cohesive, oh wait, players will ruin that the instant they touch it. How to balance this? And what we have found is most helpful is to give our GMs kind of a setting vibe, and then a general goal that the party is reaching toward, and then some general obstacles that are in the way, and then it's like, you and your table fill in the blanks. And I imagine, especially with kids, it's a lot easier to be like, what if everybody invents something for this scene? Like, is there a big, like, fallen hollow log that's across the entire valley that we're traveling through? Is there a big house that's in the middle and the guy wants us to stop playing in his yard? Like, what are we going to add to this scene?
Well, and I think one of the positives about Nomventure, so I actually came into it not having read the primer or any of Kirby's work. The first time I saw it was when they handed me the finished product and went, here, try this. I was like, okay, this is going to be a journey. But what I found very positive was that they've effectively done that. You have a beginning and you have an end. You know the goal. How you get there is fully up to you. There's suggestions on encounters. There's things you can and cannot do. But if people are going to take it fully off the rails, you are 100% empowered to go off the rails with them. It is a journey that we are all going on. And as long as you can say, here's the beginning, here's the end, you can make things up. You can have the adventure you want to go on. You can make the additions you want to. And then you can add in things and kind of guide them there, but you're not dependent upon this scripted adventure where you're like, cool, we missed that. Now what do I do? It's have fun and tell your story and enjoy yourself rather than like, great, we didn't follow those rules. Great, we didn't do this encounter. Now what? So they've done a really fantastic job, I think, overcoming that potential hurdle of like, how do I storytell with no story, but also have enough of a story that you're not just going, what am I doing today at a table?
Well,
we decided that the quest giver's voice was suspicious and we don't trust him and we're leaving.
We want Josh at our table immediately.
Back away slowly.
But yeah, that you kind of already answered one of my other questions. Is I was thinking about the adventure guide, and I was wondering if you all were imagining that as sort of a responsible adult helping guide the kids through this. But then, like, one of you was like, "Oh yeah, if you have like a 7-year-old, running the game," and like sort of the way you've described that beginning and middle is a question mark kind of thing probably really helps with a younger person trying to actually run the game. As well, how much have you guys done play testing with 6-7-year-olds or whatever as the adventure guides?
So internally I think Britt's done the most, although there are children in my life. I do not have any children myself, so we've partnered with a lot of other groups that can do that, right? We have the VGC, that's the after school program. They were kind enough to do some playtesting. I already gave a shout out to Aloha Adventures Guild. I'm actively trying right now to talk to more libraries or more school programs in my local area. I was talking to Baltimore Library just earlier this week to potentially get more playtesting. So yeah, I think internally, I think it's mostly been Brit. I don't know if you ran it for anyone, Kate, but externally, we've had quite a few groups.
But AAG has had some kids who have run it for other kids, which I thought was really neat. And, it was nice to see that our hopes that, the 8 to 12 is going to be able to successfully run games for their friends. And it's not always going to have to be Britt, Kirby, the responsible parent, overseeing it. You'll be able to plop it in a library and let people play. And Britt's kiddo is Addie's 4. So even when we start to say we have to put age ranges on things because we have to, but it scales down remarkably well. And Addie's really a testament to that younger audiences, I think, will be able to embrace it and very much be a part of the table sooner than we really expected or anticipated.
Yeah.
The hurdle with him is the fact that I have to write down his things for him. So I'll ask him, like, what's your character like? And he's just like, oh, well, he's big and he's got T-Rex teeth. Or, like it is #obsessed with dinosaurs. So anything that has the dinosaurs on it is fantastic for our household. But beyond that, like, he can get through an entire adventure with no problem. But it is aged 5 and up because, then they'll have the skills to be able to write down their own things.
And very diverse age range. I think we put on the label 5 to 11 or 12, and that's a very diverse age range. So I know going in on this, I would tell Derek this when I was sending him my early copy is well, this is kind of written for 8 and up, really, as far as reading level goes. Gameplay, kids as young as 4 has been able to play, right? And this is hopefully going to cater toward people that were like me when I was that age, where I wanted to do a lot of storytelling. And children are, I think, very often already doing storytelling, just not in a structured way per se. So I think going forward, we want to write these adventures like a very good time to be basically like guardrails, bumpers, right?
Yeah. And then I guess getting back to mods just a little bit, as as those players sort of grow into the game, they can just start adding that other stuff on there. Or if you have like an older adventure guide, like they might be able to layer in some of the mods and help the younger players like learn it or work through it or something like that.
Yeah, it's meant to scaffold with them so that eventually they'll be able to play other games such as Emberwind or Pathfinder because they'll already have those skill sets because they're learning those soft skills to start. And then you're just adding things, and things will get more complex as they mature or, as they learn. So.
Okay. All right. I know we're getting close to time, so I just want to make sure y'all have a chance to say all the stuff you need to say about everything. So talk to me just sort of about where, this is coming out, this coming Monday. So talk to me about sort of where the Kickstarter is at in that situation, like at that point in time, and what y'all's goals with it are.
So we actually just hit 9.1K today. I'm hoping we will be at 10K for Monday. We have, as of Monday, we'll have 10 days left. We close out the Kickstarter at PAX West, where both Derek and I will be. Hopefully, we will get the remaining funding there. It sounds bad to say. Ultimately, we are not dependent upon the Kickstarter being funded. Either way, Nomventure is going to be a thing. We've got backing from VGC USA. It's going into part of their after-school programs and things like that. So it'll be very nice when it's funded. But either way, Nomventure will be happening, and we're very excited about it. I think the most important thing actually on the Kickstarter is our charity tier. We've partnered with a pretty wide variety of charitable partners, VGC USA, Able Gamers, who are all doing the really good and the really hard work. And what you can do there is, instead of getting a copy of Nomventure for yourself, you can back it and we'll donate it to them so they can put it into a school, give it to a school librarian, and you can also email a suggestion if there's someone in your life that you think would benefit from having Nomventure on their shelf, or in their, a therapist's office or wherever you want that. Plus, you pick up something very exclusive. If you're a Dungeons and Dinos fan, we now have 11 exclusive staff cards and charitable partner cards. The only way to pick those up has been in person from us at a convention from the individual, or by backing this Kickstarter where you get the full and complete set all at once. There's no other way to get those. So if you are a Dungeons and Dinos fan and you want those exclusives, that is your one way. Or if you back something else and maybe ask me really, really nicely, I'll consider it. But yes, we are well on our way, and we are hopefully very excited to see it fully funded. And it will be ready, we're hoping, in time for Christmas. All of the digital assets are done and sorted and will be ready for release. And then physical fulfillment in terms of actual token and card printing, we should see in time for Christmas, if not January.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Britt and or Kirby, got anything to add?
Yeah. So, Kickstarter is still important from the perspective of it lets us do things at a higher quality, bigger, better. It gets in your hands sooner, potentially, depending on what we're talking about. And I think, to that regard, we're still taking suggestions and feedback and comments. You can reach us at nomnivoregames.com. You can comment on the Kickstarter as well. I think in particular, I would love to hear about the type of adventures or mods that you would like to see. You want a space adventure? Hit us up. You want one of the popular mods that was requested of us was leveling up, which we didn't initially have. And it's in the work right now. So we do have a mod for leveling up. So we're very reactive. We want to hear from everyone, everywhere, all over. Yes.
And you guys have a Discord server as well.
We do. It's currently the Emberwind Discord.
Okay. It has been rebranded. It is now Nomnivore.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And almost all of us are in there as developers, so like you guys can just tag us. If you like at Kirby, he'll probably respond. But it's real fun to watch Derek respond at all hours of the night because I swear he never sleeps.
Yeah, I'll be sitting across from Derek. His eyes are closed. He's sleeping, and somehow he's still responding.
Yeah, when I was
ghost writer for his Discord.
Yeah, when I was trying to get a hold of Derek ahead of TMG because we wanted to ask him to be on that panel they asked us to do, I was like, oh man, how do I get a hold of this guy? And I joined the Discord at first, and I was like, I feel like it's probably rude just to at him in the Discord to try to get his attention. And so instead I went and I sent him a message on Instagram, and he got back to me in like 5 minutes. And he was like, oh no, yeah, sounds great. Just like, let's confirm the time to make sure I'm not double booked on anything. And I sent him the schedule. He's like, oh no, done. We're there. Done. Absolutely. 100%. But yeah, it was just so quick and easy to get a hold of him. I felt really stupid for being like, oh man, I shouldn't add him on the Discord. I'm not sure that's polite just to drop in there and be like, yo,
find us. We will hop on calls with people. Yeah. We love to hang out and play not only our games, but other people's games. Yeah. We absolutely love to hang out with the community and field questions and feedback too. So find us anywhere, everywhere, in the public, on the Discord. We're happy to chat.
Fantastic.
Just don't touch my kid in public at the grocery store. That's all I ask. You know?
Oh yeah, that's weird. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Somebody did that this week, and I was very, very concerned.
That's really weird.
I just don't touch people.
Yeah, no touching in general.
Yeah.
That like aren't your people.
He was like, he came up and he touched my kid's head, and he's like, "Is this for sale?" And I was just like, I need to leave. Like, I just left my cart and left.
Oh, that's.
What in the world were they thinking?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing like ending an episode on an up note.
I know. Where are my emotions flashcards for disgust and concern?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
But I want to thank, again, all three of you for making the time this evening to hang out with me and Josh and chat about this. After 6 weeks of trying to organize a conversation, I'm very pleased that we were able to make this happen. But for folks listening, we're going to probably jump into a couple of more short deep dive conversations over on Patreon after this. But for anything that everybody's talked about today, we're going to have links in the show notes and everything. So, Josh, do you have anything left you want to get out there and ask them before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think I got all my questions out during the meat of the episode, which... I'm really excited about this, and I think I need to show my wife owns a comic and game store, and she's been promoting Kids on Bikes a lot because it's an easier system, it's a little simpler, and it's something that kids can pick up and enjoy. Mm-hmm. And I think she needs to be conscious of this because she may very well need them on the shelf.
I love Kids on Bikes. But,
Kids on Bikes is great.
No, pop us an email. We'll absolutely send over some copies too, just to demo in the store and put hands on, because we're always interested in more feedback too. So if only from that perspective, there's no obligation to be a retailer. We really just want to know your thoughts.
All right, that's great. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Have a good night.
All right.
And we're back after having heard from the lovely folks at Nomnivore Games. One quick point of clarification. At the beginning of the episode, we had not checked the math that Kate had done during the episode. And for the tail end, I was like, you know what? We should check that math. It turns out you have a week. So do not delay. If you want to go ahead and support this project, you certainly should sooner than later. Now, of course, also, as Kate said, it's coming out regardless, but, you know, we love small creators who are doing really innovative new stuff that's really cool. Mm-hmm. And I would hope that you all feel similarly. And this is a big way in which you can make sure that not only do they recognize the value of a product like this and a project like this, but that they are being rewarded for taking these gambles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank them again, because that's three very busy people who gave us a lot of time on a weekday evening. Like the episode, that you just listened to was only about an hour, but we actually were on a call for like 3 hours between just like getting to know each other, recording the episode, and then recording the GGP deep dive stuff for Patreon, which again, I encourage you to go listen to. Other than that, I think we're good, and we can just tell them what they need to know, Josh.
Yeah, well, for starts, of course, everybody should know that they should telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. I don't know why podcast was the word that tripped me up. What's up with that?
Scott, leave that in.
Rude.
Yeah. And that's because the best way to get word out about the podcast is to do it via word of mouth with folks and get folks to give us 5-star reviews on all the platforms. If you want to give us less than a 5-star review, I would encourage you to talk to us first, discuss your concerns, and figure out what we can do to get that 5th star.
And if you want to come talk to us about ways to get that 5th star, you could do that at bit.ly/Goblin Discord, where we have a dedicated Goblins and Growlers podcast channel for all of our GG peeps to come and converse and talk about the latest episode and also disagree with us on things. And you will frequently see me jump into those conversations and engage with folks. It is not it's not like a repository where we just steal all your comments for the show, as we sometimes do.
And then just chatting about the Patreon again really quick. I made sort of a release schedule change a little bit too, in that now the video version of the podcast is going to come out Mondays on Patreon exclusively, and then Thursdays it'll be available publicly up on YouTube. So bear that in mind. If you really love looking at us, you can join the Patreon and you can look at us more.
Look at us earlier.
Yeah, look at me. Look at me. I'm the podcast host now.
And that website is patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers.
I think that's about all we got. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, check out our sister podcast, Quid Pro Roll. I play a sneaky half-elf rogue, and Brandon plays an over-the-hill professional wrestler, just looking to regain some of that lost glory. Go to linktr.ee/Goblins and Growlers to check out the newsletter, as well as all of our other, like our website, our social media pages, things like that. And then I think the last thing would be to go to our Big Cartel for Goblins and Growlers merch, goblinsandgrowlers.bigcartel.com.
All right. Well, I guess we'll just catch everybody later then.
We're going to kick it to our sponsored ad read, because we have a sponsorship this month, Brandon.
Yeah. And just to be very clear, what follows after this, after Josh says bye, is a sponsored ad read. I say again, it is a sponsored ad read. I'm trying to leave no room for ambiguity here, that it is a sponsored ad read.
I think it was pretty clear, but I do appreciate making absolute certainty there's no confusion.
I'm thinking about the audio version of the podcast where there's not going to be a big banner surrounding the video that says advertisement.
We just get Scott to add background audio that says ad read. Ad read.
Over and over and over.
Ad read.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll catch everybody next time.
Bye, y'all.
If you like tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, you probably love thinking about your character's stats, and one way or another, taking a chance on your probability of success or failure. Underdog Fantasy lets you have that same experience with your favorite sports ball players.
With Underdog Fantasy, you can draft your lineup and build your adventuring party. Every pick'em entry could mean the difference between victory and defeat, and you don't get bardic inspiration here. Whether you're a veteran player or a newbie, Underdog Fantasy has the perfect contest for you.
They've got quests for every type of player, whether you're into football, basketball, baseball, and many other sports. You can enter its daily contests, pick'em contests, or dive into a season-long campaign with no salary caps and no long-term commitments. Just draft, strategize, and let the games begin.
So head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app and sign up with the promo code MCA. That's the acronym May Contain Action to start your adventure today and claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer of up to $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy is where underdogs become legends.
Participants must be 18 or older, 21 or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 or older in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you or a loved one are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER, that's 1-800-426-2537, or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, you can call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, that's 1-800-639-8783, or text Next Step to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY 467369.